Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming out on this beautiful Saturday, and I see some really familiar faces. And I want to personally just thank you right now for your continued support for this institution and programming. This is amazing. I mean, it's like when I look in the audience and I'm so familiar with all these faces, it's almost like family for me, So I want to just take this time to appreciate all of you who come here to support the institution. All right, I'm Vita Silva, the museum project coordinator, and today is, I get excited about all my programs, but today is very special as well because I have an extraordinary author here that I am honored to have in this house, okay? So, but before we even introduce you to him, the institution here is, we thrive on bringing special programming to the community. And we have a support group, Friends Stewards of the African American Museum and Library, which supports this institution. They have membership. I think it was like $15 per year for seniors, $25 individual, $35 for family per year. So they're very reasonable. So if you just haven't become a member, members do have privileges, VIP privileges here, okay? So you might want to think about that, all right? Because we have some footage here, for instance, the Black Panthers footage that was found, I believe, in a basement or a garage or something, reel to reel. We digitalized those so we could show them to the public. So you can't even see those here. See these anywhere but here. And so we do VIP showings of that. And then later on down the year, we'll open it up to the general public. So then you're talking about opening of exhibitions and special VIP receptions that are built around the artists. So like I said, it's just, it has some privileges. So think about it while I'm doing some talking. And we got a table back there with our president. There she is, raise her hand. Ms. Claudia Noble Livingston is the president. Thank you, Claudia, for being out today. Okay, so also, before I really get into the institution itself and all the resources, I have another special guest. I've been talking with a new organization that I'm really excited about partnering with because they have almost like we're pretty much doing the same thing, reaching out to the public, sharing knowledge. And this particular person I just met not too long ago, and we just hit it off really well because her organization is new. However, I asked her to come today, and so I'm going to give her a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about what she does. And I have been doing a series called the Festival of Knowledge. I called it that because I realized people love to go to festivals. So I decided, well, if I put festival on there, what goes with that? I said knowledge. So I call it the Festival of Knowledge. I was doing it 2 days, and before the pandemic, and it was a big hit. That's when you have all professionals who come in here, whether they're holistic, whether they're chiropractors, acupuncture. I have caterers to come in and do demos on how healthy food, mental health speakers, you name it, MDs. There is so many people here that they are willing, professionals are willing to spend their time for the community. So we open up about 10:30 in the morning, and we have them here until about 5:30. You can come and get tested. You can do all that. You have lectures. We even have a guy comes in to teach you how to do some Zumba to keep that heart rate up. So meditation. We have a room where you can go in there. We have meditation chairs where you can sit down. All about mental health, keeping you having fun, but knowledge, educating. That's why I call it the Festival of Knowledge. So, with that in mind, I have Anna, who is going to talk a little bit about her organization, which I said is fairly new. And they're pretty much interested in senior health, okay? Letting seniors know that there are alternative ways and places that you can go to get some sort of help, all free to the public. So Anna, you got about 3 minutes.
I don't need 3 minutes. Just really quickly, everyone.
This is Anna, everybody. One Medical. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Vita. Okay, so thank you. I won't take up too much of your time. I'm with One Medical. We are an alternative primary care office. We have, excuse me, a couple offices here in Oakland, one by the lake, one uptown, and we offer kind of an alternative to a Kaiser or a Stanford Health. We focus on, excuse me, we focus on relationship-based care. So when you see your doctor, you are going to build a relationship with your provider, and we help you reach your goals. So it's different from just like prescribing medicine, sending you on your way. It's a really different experience, and we just want to let you all know we're here, and we have a raffle if you guys are interested, and any other information. I have flyers, and I have a table downstairs. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk more about the Festival of Knowledge.
Yes.
Now, the institution, Research Institution for African American History and Culture, 4 departments, okay? 4 beautiful department. But I'm going to let the library assistant tell you a little bit more about the institution. I want to talk about today, this month, April, Jazz Awareness Month, and spoken word. That's what. So if you walked in and you saw Mr. Sammy Davis Jr., that is because he is indeed a legend. He is called Mr. Entertainer, and he made the way for a lot of African Americans in the jazz and acting as well. So that's why you see that on. Of course, it's going to be paused during our presentation of our special guest. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce you to our library assistant, who's going to give you some resources regarding the institution and also tell you a little bit about our special guest. Thank you for coming, and I'm going to talk back to you real soon, okay, about that membership, okay? Thank you. All right.
All right, so welcome everyone to the African American Museum and Library. So we are a research institution for African American history with a primary focus on Oakland, the Bay Area, California, and the West Coast. We have 4 departments, so we have, of course, we are in our museum gallery now. So it features Visions Towards Tomorrow, which is our permanent exhibit, which is on African Americans in Oakland, beginning with the 1890s. We have touch screens that you can listen to the oral histories and things that we have. There's small segments that we have, but you can find the full-length interviews and things in our archives. So the archives is our second department. We have over 160 collections that document the African American experience. Henry Delton Williams collection, who was a Motown designer. Slim Jenkins, who was a part of the 7th Street, so many entrepreneurs. Ida Jackson, the first African American school teacher in Oakland. Lionel Wilson and Ron Dellums, who were both mayors, but of course Dellum was also in Congress for 27 years. Then we have our library, which is reference only. We have an archives, we have a rare book collection that we also have as a part of that library section as well. So our oldest book dates back to the early 1800s. We have books that have been signed by Dr. Martin Luther King as well. And then, so if you're ever interested in doing tours, we have appointment tours that we have here during the week. So you can schedule group tours that way. And then we have drop-in tours on Saturdays at noon. So it could be one person, it could be 10 people. We give them basically the full tour. We show them the mural, we show them the exhibition, and things like that as well. So our chief curator, also Bomadelli, is also in the audience here as well. So I believe he may be speaking in a minute as well. But I just want to give you some information on our speaker today, who is James Weeks. So Weeks is an internationally known spiritual leader and author who has spoken at Harvard University, made guest appearances on numerous radio and internet shows, including KPFA's Africa Today and Ancestral Voices of the UK. He is the author of today's book, which is Meditations Across the King River, African-Inspired Wisdom for Life's Journey, and the producer of the upcoming documentary of the same name. He is also a journalist with publications in the Parenting Magazine, San Francisco Weekly, Rega Beat, just to name a few. So I'm going to give this back to Vita, and she's going to bring up our speaker.
Thank you so much. You know, and I know you're waiting to meet Mr. Weeks, but I like for our chief curator to come up and just do a welcome. So bear with me. Mr. Weeks is definitely here. Okay. I'm not hiding. He's right here. Okay. Hello, Chief. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I have one announcement. I'm holding in my hand our monthly program schedule for this month, the month of April. And so our programs, our exhibitions are listed here. Our reading hours for children is listed here, and our programs are listed on the back. So please be sure to get a copy of this on your way out. And we have flyers for each of the programs that are listed on this program. And with that, I am through because I want to hear from the Babalawo himself. Yes. And Babalawo, as you may or may not know, is the title for the priest of Ifa traditions from the Yoruba people. Okay. Thank you so very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. So I want to say it's a great honor to be in this wonderful museum, to be surrounded by all these great, great souls. And I just want to remind everyone that all of us we're all part of history, and our stories matter, and our visions matter, and our passions matter. And I want to say that even our problems matter. So when people ask me about my journey and what led me to this book and what led me to the film project that I'm working on across the Kings River, I always like to say that I'm here because 20 years ago, I had a problem. My family had a problem. And the problem was our family was falling apart. The problem was we didn't know what to do. And the problem was I didn't know if my day was going to be up, down, sideways. My problem was every day when I went to work, I couldn't concentrate at work because all I could do was think about how my family was falling apart. And we didn't know what to do. And my wife and I were arguing all the time. And my kids were confused all the time. And the challenge that we had at the time was that my oldest son, who came here today to be a part of this, Malcolm, was going through a very rough time, like so many youth in Oakland go through, like so many kids in the inner cities go through. And at that time in his life, some 20 years ago, he wanted to be a thug. He found that life attractive. And that was tearing our family apart, because we didn't know from one minute to the next when the next police car was going to come showing up to our house. And so it was a very, very stressful time. I always liked to talk about that personal problem that took us all around the world. And the reason why I like to do that is because, let's face it, we all have problems. And we're going to have problems. You know, if our problem isn't a relationship problem, maybe our problem is a financial problem. If it's not a financial problem, maybe it's an emotional problem. If it's not an emotional problem, maybe it's a political problem. But the beautiful thing, the challenge for all of us, is to find out, well, where is it that our problems are taking us? And to ask ourselves, maybe this problem that we have might be a gift in disguise. So one night, as I couldn't take it anymore, when I came home and my wife just told me just one more incident that had happened. I don't even remember what the incident was. I felt like I needed to go get some help. And someone told me that there was this man from Nigeria in town, an Ifa priest. His name was Awodiran Agbola. And he was giving readings. And someone said, well, maybe you should go get a reading. And I remember that I didn't want to go, you know, because he told me about this more than once. And I didn't want to go. But I felt like I had to go. I felt like maybe if I go, I might get some insight into what's happening to my family. So I went that night. This man that I'd never met before did a reading for me, a spiritual reading. And I was only hoping to get some insight into my son. That's the only reason why I went. And when he started doing this spiritual reading, and he started chanting, and he started praising these deities, he told me, yes, my son was involved with the wrong people, and I needed to keep my eyes on him. But then he also told me some things about myself. He said that I was meant to be doing spiritual work, that I was meant to be a spiritual advisor, and that in the future, people would know who I am all around the world. And when he said that to me, all of a sudden, all of the problems that I was going through, my family, my son, they started to make some sense to me. And I started to look at my son in a different way. And I started to think, my son is a messenger. I started to look at my problem as being a messenger. And that night when I found out more about my own destiny, I almost wanted to thank my son for causing all this havoc that was turning our lives around. And so when I came back home and I told my wife what I was told, you know, I said, well, if this is really my destiny, maybe I should go to Africa to learn more about this ancient African tradition that comes from the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria. If I'm destined to be this Ifa priest, this spiritual counselor, I should go learn about it. I should go through this initiation. And then my wife Stephanie suggested, well, you should take Malcolm with you, because maybe the elders there can help us. So we ended up going to Nigeria. This was in 2003. We went to Nigeria. I was there for about 3 weeks. I went through a spiritual initiation. And the elders there, they started helping my son. They gave him a spiritual bath. They gave him things to eat. They gave him things to drink. And I remember, after being in Nigeria for 3 weeks, one of the elders said, you're going to see some good things in your family. And I was so stressed out, and I was so depressed at the time. When he said, you're going to see some good things in your family, I wasn't sure if he was telling me that to make me feel good, or if I was really going to see some good things in my family. And I remember about 1 month after I got back from Nigeria, Malcolm actually stayed in Nigeria, I think a week or two longer than I did. About maybe 1 or 2 months after we got back from Nigeria, the psychologist who was seeing Malcolm at the time said, I don't know what happened in Africa, but your son is new and improved, right? And I always like to share that story because when I look at my son today, I'm reminded that a miracle can happen. I've experienced a miracle, and I believe that there are miracles out there for all of us. right? And so if you're going through a crisis at the moment, just know that, well, your miracle might be right around the corner. So when I look at my son today, my son now is a changed person. He's an excellent father. He has 4 kids. Excellent, excellent father, right? But he's also a businessman. He has his own business for years. And so when I look at him, I'm just reminded of what can happen and what our African traditions have to honor. By the way, this is a photograph that I brought here to show you all of our time in Nigeria. This is one of the healers that helped us. I love this photograph. I especially love the expression on this healer's face because it's so stern. And the expression on his face is just tells you what our life was like at that time. It was hard. It was no laughing matter. So over a period of years, after we got back from Nigeria, and I was working for corporate America at that time, someone told me that maybe I should consider doing a film, right? And so after I started working on the film project, I created a Facebook page, and people were inspired by the inspiration I was sharing, and they suggested, James, you should write a book. So this is the book, Meditations Across the Kings River. This book was inspired by many of my travels throughout the Caribbean, especially Guadeloupe, Jamaica, West Africa. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share a few chapters, and then we'll open up the questions that you have. Also, I wanted to say that as I talk about miracles and transformation and the things that can happen, recently, last year, my son and I, we launched our own brand of honey. This is called Sweet Simone. And it all started when one day I decided to keep bees for my garden, right? And then Malcolm had the idea of, well, we should create our own brand of honey. So I love sharing this because it's an example of how something sweet can come out of such hard times. So here it is, we're offering something that is sweet to our communities amidst all of the hardship that's in our communities. So I begin the book with a chapter on purpose, finding our life's purpose, because it's a question that people often ask me as I work with them. It's a question that I hear a lot. How can I connect with purpose? How do I know what purpose is? So my wife came up with the title of this chapter, Our Greatest Job, Finding Purpose. So I'm going to read. My friend Vanessa messaged me on Facebook recently. How does one discover their purpose, she asked. Does your spirit guide or teacher tell you? I ask because I wonder when I'll ever know mine, she asked. I want to choose to do something in my life that makes me feel happy and fulfilled, she said. But I also wanted to be aligned with my life's purpose. I hear this question often. The search for purpose is universal, and it is one of the core themes of my film, Across the Kings River. For many, the quest for meaning is elusive, because the struggle to survive is so time-consuming and draining. It often leaves little time for addressing the needs of our soul and our longing to live a purposeful life. Given the daunting challenges in the world and in our personal lives, many dismiss the quest for purpose as irrelevant or self-indulgent. I strongly disagree. Our purpose, no matter how humble, has a role to play in the healing of the earth. So in this chapter, I gave a number of tips to people who are searching for purpose. And tip number one, the clues are all around us. You just have to put them together. Ask yourself the following questions. What are your hobbies? What causes are you drawn to? If money were not a factor, what would you spend most of your time doing? What did you aspire to be as a child growing up? What kind of help do others come to you for? What kind of books do you like to read? Even what kind of jobs have you done in the past? So I just want to comment on some of these suggestions. So many times when we think about following purpose, we think about what is it that we're here to do? You know, what should I do, right? But it's not, purpose isn't only about what we do, it's about our being, who we are as a person. So even though my purpose, part of my journey led me down this road of becoming a spiritual advisor and now working on this book and working on a film, well, it's clear that part of my purpose was to be a father, right? As simple as that, right? So if I wasn't a father, I wouldn't have met Malcolm or my wife, and this journey that I'm on probably wouldn't have happened. So as I reflect on my own life and my own journey, I sometimes ask myself, is the journey that I'm on just my own destiny, or is it because I met Malcolm, or is it because I met my wife? And so all of these things are connected. And so if you're in a relationship with someone, well, that's part of your purpose, right? If you're someone's friend, somehow that's part of your purpose also. So all of these things are connected. I don't think of purpose as being, sometimes the way people think of purpose, they act as though we're like cogs in a machine, right? Or in a factory, and we could only do one thing, and that one thing only. But I believe that our potential is vast, and what you, me, might be called to do might change as we evolve and grow. If you would have asked me 2 years ago when me and my son be marketing this brand of honey sweets and loan, I would have said no. I mean, well, it wasn't a thought, we didn't plan about it, we didn't think about it. It just happened organically. And so what I found on my own journey is the things that I'm led to, they just tend to flow, they just tend to happen organically without me thinking about it, without me planning them out. It's just one thing leads to the next, and sometimes a problem or a frustration leads me down another road, and then I discover, I like this, I can get passionate about this, right? And so as you reflect on your own journey, your own purpose, I encourage you to think about it. Just follow the inspiration that comes to you. For me, that's a lot of what I do. I just pay attention to how I feel inspired, or what I feel inspired to do next. And I do those things without thinking about them. Also, you know, I want to say that in about 2 months, we're going to be launching an updated version of this book that contains a whole new chapter and revisions to many of the chapters that are in this book. And so one of the additions in the updated book that we're launching in June, July, is the story of one of the great African spiritual leaders, Malidoma Somé, who passed away 2 years ago. Malidoma Somé was the author of the book Of the Water and the Spirit. Before Malidoma Somé appeared on the literary scene, a lot of the books about African spirituality were very academic, but he gave a personal touch to it. But one of the things I loved about his life, and why I'm bringing this up as we talk about purpose, is he led a hard life, and as a kid he was in prison. Well, he was kidnapped by Jesuit priests, and he was taken away from his culture. And so over a period of years, he had to relearn his culture and get back into his African spiritual traditions. So the reason why Malidoma's journey is so important is oftentimes when people think about purpose, they forget that there might be some hardships along the way. You know, and so when people experience difficulty as they go about fulfilling their purpose or on the journey, they think that, well, maybe something is wrong. Well, the answer is no, nothing is wrong. It's just that. It's just part of the journey. I also want to say that before I move on to the next chapter, for those who are not that familiar with what these African traditions have to offer us, I will say several things about why they're important. One is all of these African traditions, spiritual traditions, one of the things that's common among all of them, one is the reverence for the ancestors. And why is that important? Well, it's very important for many reasons. It's very important for our own emotional and mental health. So one of the problems that we have here in the West, in the United States, the Western countries, is people feel alone. So even though we have all this social media, the reality is people feel alone. People in American society are conditioned to believe that we have to do everything by ourselves. We need to figure it out on our own. But what these African traditions are trying to teach us is no, we have, all of us, every one of us, we are connected to ancestors who are around us all the time and who are going to guide us. So it's not about you figuring it all out. It's not about me figuring us all out. It's about all of us realizing that no, we have spiritual help that's available to all of us, and they can help us. You know, we're part of a team that we can't see. So one of the contributions of African spiritual systems is this whole reverence, this understanding of ancestors. Number two, I would say the reverence for nature, for the earth, the connection to the earth. Why is this important? It's important for a lot of reasons. Our connection to earth is connected to how we feel also, our emotional health, even our physical health. So a lot of our emotional problems, I feel, also comes from the fact that we're not involved with producing our own food, we don't have any contact with the earth, we're watching screens all day long, we're watching Netflix all day long. You know, not only do we not grow our own food, these days, half of us don't even go to the supermarket to buy our own foods. We get DoorDash or whatever, right? So all of these things create imbalances, and I feel are contributing to emotional problems and even mental illness. So how else can these traditions help us? Well, in the area of healing, these African traditions, many times they have healing methods and methodologies that our Western doctors don't know anything about. So they can help us out. And so many times in my family, my elders in Nigeria might say, hey, we need to do something for you, or some member of your family, there's some things going on that, you know, we need to address spiritually. So there's healing. So when we think about advances like in Asian or Oriental medicine, like acupuncture, we have to understand that our African systems, they have healing to do too. So it's about expanding how we think of healing. You know, yes, you know, we embrace the contributions of Western medicine, but we have to understand that our healing might come from a variety of places. So it's just about expanding how we think of healthcare. And so another contribution I would say that Africa has to offer to spiritual traditions is spiritual guidance, counseling, helping people make better choices, you know, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's professional. So there are many ways, there are many contributions that our traditions have to offer. And I want to move on to another chapter because there's some other things I want to share. So this chapter I'm about to read is called The Return of the Matriarch, and it's about a spiritual experience that I had with my grandmother here in San Francisco many years ago. Before this experience, although I knew about the concept of ancestors, I didn't believe it until this experience happened to me. So I'll read a few paragraphs from what this chapter. It's called The Return of the Matriarch. Alma Dawud Wa, Alma Dawud Wa, Alma Dawud Wa. Alma in Spanish means soul. Wa is a Yoruba word meaning to come. Alma Dawud is my maternal grandmother. She was the family matriarch, a woman of unshakable faith who passed over in 2002. She raised 7 of her own children and other young men who were not biologically her own. I call on my grandmother often when I meditate in the morning, when I sense tension in my family, when I need inspiration, when I perform spiritual divination for others, when I'm racked with worry. In corporate America, where I worked for 19 years, I kept a photo of my grandmother on the wall in my office. She was wearing an elegant light blue dress and a hat when I snapped that photo first strolling out of church at my cousin's wedding. She looked beautiful. I would glance at the photo whenever I needed an infusion of hope at work. Before staff meetings, I made sure I arrived to the conference room before everyone else did so I could pour libations to her and my ancestors. Ibaye. We say in our tradition, it means I salute you, those who are no longer see. So the experience that Malcolm and I experienced with my grandfather happened in San Francisco. And what happened was this famous medium, Robert Brown, was giving a presentation. He was talking about connections to our departed loved ones. And so I told Malcolm, well, let's go check him out, right? And so we went to this workshop in San Francisco. There were about maybe 50 people in the audience. And Robert Brown, who's internationally known, he's done readings for Princess Diana, all these big celebrities in the United Kingdom. You know, he spoke about the different ways in which spirits interact with us. And towards the end of his talk, the workshop, after he talked about things like meditation and chakras, he said he was going to give a demonstration, right? And so there was about 50 people in the room. He gave a demonstration of two spirits who had passed on, and he said what they were trying to say to the people in the audience. And then towards the end of his talk, he came back to where Malcolm and I were sitting, and he said, there's a woman that wants to speak to you, an older woman. And Malcolm and I, we were a bit confused at first. But the more he spoke, the more I realized that he was talking about my grandmother, because he described how she had 7 children, how she was a woman of faith, how she just, she liked helping people. And the message that my grandmother gave that day was really directed to Malcolm. But in speaking to Malcolm, I know that she was also speaking to me. So she was saying that his days of trouble were over. And she was saying that he's going to, I think, find another job. And there were so many details that she mentioned. A pain in his back that he had at one time. So many things that only he knew that I didn't know. That experience just changed the way that I look at life and death. Before this experience, I just looked at death as, well, you're in the grave, you're up with your life up until this point, and then you're in the grave, right? And so it gave me a deeper faith and understanding of these African traditions. And so I always like to say that even though I had an experience of my grandmother through a medium, when I'm working with people, I always like people to know that you don't necessarily have to have an experience like that to connect to your own loved ones. The reality is they're interacting with us on a daily basis, and they're trying their best to send messages to us. It's just a question of us becoming aware of how they're sending the messages. For some people, it might happen in a dream. But for many of us, it won't be a dream, because not all of us are dreamers, right? I don't dream that much, so it may come in the form of feelings. You may feel a certain way. You may feel guided to do something, or go somewhere, or read something. And what I find that happens most common is they'll either send a message to you directly in a way that maybe you might understand, but even more common is they're going to send a message through someone else, It could be someone that you know, it could be someone that you don't know. You could be in the grocery store shopping, minding your own business. Someone could walk up to you and say something. And that's the message that was sent from your loved ones to give to you, to send you in a direction that's more healthy for you, and to even alter your life. So one of my big messages to you today is you can't really miss the guidance from your ancestors. And what I love to say is that it's like a GPS system in a sense. When you think of a GPS in your car, right? Let's say you're going somewhere and you take a wrong turn. Well then, no problem. The GPS is going to give you another route. Let's say you go that other route and you take another wrong turn. Well, no problem. The GPS is going to give you another way. And if you miss the next one, there's no worries. You're getting another, you're going to be rerouted yet another way. And that's exactly how our journey is with the ancestors. We might miss 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, 7, it doesn't matter. Eventually, what your ancestors are trying to say to you, it's going to become obvious. And so it becomes a question of you following. So we're almost at the 3 o'clock mark. And so what I would like to do now is I would like to open it up to any questions you all have about anything. Before I open it up, I want to explain, there's certain chapters in here that I want to just mention briefly, let you know like why they're in here. So in this book, Meditations Across the King's River, one of the chapters talks about technology, and it talks about how the history of computer technology can be traced all the way back to Africa, all the way back to these same spiritual traditions. So that chapter is very important because most people are not aware of that. And I found out about this through a scholar by the name of Dr. Ron Eglash. So he talks about how these same traditions that we've been taught to hate and demonize and call evil or backward, how these same systems had a huge impact on the history of Western mathematics. And these same systems influenced European scholars. And they started using our divination systems, which is what we use to communicate the spirit. And they created a code. So that's the code that these computers use to speak to each other. So we have a heritage not only of spirituality, we have a history of technology, we have a history of mathematics. It's very important for our children to know this, that we're not just here to dance. We could do computer technology, we could be scientists, we could be whatever, right? So it's very important. And also in this book, I also included a chapter on finance, which is crucial because we tend to be so far behind financially, and especially in spiritual communities, finance doesn't often come up enough, and what happens is people get left behind. In this book, I talk about a study called The Road to Zero Wealth, where social scientists are predicting by the year 2053, African Americans will have zero wealth. And that's an alarming statistic, and we just can't sit back and allow it to happen. So how we educate ourselves financially depends on, there are many paths you can take. Reading more about financial literacy. It may be deciding on one strategy you're going to work on this year. It could be working on credit. It could be maybe learning how to run your own business. These days, I find myself, I've learned how to trade, so I mentor people in trading and investing in the financial markets, which has become a joyful experience for me. So there are many ways, there's no limit, and also having an estate planning, having wills in place, understanding trust. There's so many avenues we could go down, but it's just important that we just pick one so that we can secure the future for our little ones, those who are coming after us. So I'd love to open it up to questions about anything. And if you have any questions from Malcolm, he's here. He might, he'll be happy to tell you about his journey and what he's discovered, what Africa was like for him, if you have questions about that.
I have a question. This is Malcolm.
Yes.
So Malcolm, when your dad said we're going to Africa, how did you react to that, and were you willing to go?
Yes, I was definitely willing to go. Yes, I was willing to go, and it was kind of like an escape. I was currently in and out of incarceration on house arrest, so it was a way for me to get away from that situation. Unbeknownst, I didn't know how impactful it would be. So yes, I was eager to go.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Do you want to tell them what your experience was like?
Sure. My experience was I couldn't believe how big the world was. We left on a Monday, and I believe we traveled all of Tuesday, about 10 or 12 hours to Amsterdam, a few hour wait there, and then 6 to 8 hours to Nigeria. So we arrived Wednesday. Of course, there's a time change as well, so it felt like I traveled for 2 days. So that was the biggest shock, is how big this world, growing up in the inner city, sometimes we think we know it all and this is all there is to the world. And so that was really shocking to me, that this world is so big. This plane travels 500 miles an hour and it still took, 2 days to get there. That was it, the beauty of the landscape, the nature. Again, being in the inner city, you don't see bats, you don't see some of the beautiful natural beauty. So that was also very big. And the spiritual beauty. you know, we're often taught seeing is believing. You have to see it to believe it. And so that trip opened my eyes to that believing something, you will see it. And that there's more is in between the lines. I like to say that was the first time my third eye opened. It was in Nigeria.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'm sorry, we only have one microphone, so I will have to play Phil Donahue.
Additional question. Oh, so I want to say too. So one of the things that struck me in Nigeria was how difficult it can be to be open to other cultures, right? So even if we want to, if we say, you know what, I'm going to be open-minded because I should be. You know, it's very difficult because we're ingrained to think, oh, the Western world is just the best. It's just the pinnacle of everything. And so I say this because when my Yoruba friends said that, oh, you know, these elders, these healers, these Babylons were giving my son something to drink, I was like worried. I didn't say it up front, but for days I was just dreading that. And I was thinking, well, what if it makes him crazy? That's what I was honestly thinking. How will I go back to my wife and say, you know what? They gave him something to drink, and guess what? He went crazy. So now our problem is worse, you know? And so I was happy to find out that in Yoruba culture, these healers, like when they're giving you something to drink, they're drinking it first. They're going to demonstrate it to you that it's not gonna harm you. So they'll take a sip first, and they're giving it to you to drink. So in this case, this healer here, he took his own medicine, right? Took some, he sipped some, and he gave it to Malcolm to try. And this really struck me because it made me think, like in our Western system here, what if our doctors had to take some of the same medicine that they're prescribing to us, right? Would they be so willing, would they be so quick to prescribe it, right? And maybe not, I mean, who knows, maybe not. But it just shows you, you know, the differences in cultures and how we can all benefit in some way from what these other cultures have to offer.
That's me. I just want to thank you for your talk, also for your courage, because I think that, you know, taking Malcolm out of the community, just uprooting the two of you and just going and trusting that process is really courageous, and it was obviously the right thing to do for Malcolm. And I just think the community aspect, the ancestor aspect that you talked about, that's what we need more of in our community, that appreciation. So I just wanted to say thank you for the talk, and thank you for showing us that, you know, that's a really courageous thing to do, and it worked well with Malcolm, and I just wish other young people in the community had that kind of dedication, you know, to his well-being as a parent, as your wife showed. So thank you, it was a fabulous talk.
Hi, my name is Faina. Your book. And I got to also read your email regarding the honey that you. So I must say, I love how, you know, the book is written, because to me it's holistic. You were saying it was added, this was added, this, and all of it feels holistic to me, and that's how my person's reference always is. I like to see holistic aspect in everything. And you know, when you were talking about the garden and just that whole piece of nowadays everything's concrete, people on their phones, this and that, and we lost the touch with earth. And I know when I'm able to just go and touch the earth or just sit there, you know, with the trees and all, it just brings me back to center. And I'm able to go within. I don't necessarily have to, you know, be in that space, but just when I go there, the air, everything is so much more clear, and I'm able to go within, and like I said, when you're quiet, you probably hear your ancestors, because I get, different words and different ideas come to my mind when I'm in that space. But that was so important, that what you were saying about that whole piece of the earth, and then the bees, and you're using the bees to help pollinate, and all of that's part of saving, our planet. And it's so important that we're aware of that. And I know Missy back there, she does the gardens, I know she and I must say, I really appreciate you, because reading the book, there were just certain places, we talked about purpose, it just resonated with my person, and I just really enjoyed it, and that's why I made sure I came today so you can sign my book, and just give you, many thanks for your sharing and your experience and your son, and it's just, I love it. Thank you. Okay, Don.
Well, thank you for that. I feel that, in the case of us connected to the earth, I just feel they're just simple things that we all could do every day, And to your point, their ancestors, from what I've come to find out, spirit, they like to hang out in nature too. And so you mentioned getting messages in nature. Not that long ago, I was watching a documentary. It was an interview with Lionel Richie, the great composer, and he was saying that a lot of his music comes from being out in nature or in a garden someplace. That's a source of his inspiration, and it's a source of a lot of people's inspiration, right? So we just have to find simple ways to connect. It's just part of the healing that we all need. And it doesn't have to be for a long period of time. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, going to a body of water, or just being near a tree. A lot of the things that I feel that can help us in profound ways, they're simple things, they're not complicated. How our ancestors work with us, it's in simple ways. They do understand what we're trying to say to them. They are around us. They do hear you. They do know what you're going through. So it's just having that trust and really believing that you do have a personal connection with your ancestors. An analogy that I sometimes like to give people is that when you think about a fish, and the fish is around water all the time, that's the fish's home. Well, our ancestors are around us all the time, just like that. We're like the fish in the sea of their ancestors. Whilst we're swimming in that sea, they're all around us. They are aware of us. They're here to not judge us. They're here to support us. And another thing I want to say, an ancestor doesn't have to be perfect in order to help us, right? It doesn't mean that they have to have perfect lives in order to be of service to us. And sometimes that's a trap where people fall into and think, well, I don't want to pray to that ancestor because he did X, Y, Z. He wasn't a good person, and she did this, and this. Someone doesn't have to be a saint to help us. Because they went through whatever it is that they went through, that might be part of the reason why they want to help us, so that we can break a cycle in our family, right? They can still very much be of service to us and guide us and show us love.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this time, you taking time out to talk about your business. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you are a spiritual counselor. What type of counseling do you do, and how can people get in contact with you?
All right, well, okay. So my website is acrossthekingsriver.com. My phone number is, I think, website is right here. My phone number. I'm easily found, So I'm a diviner in the yoga spiritual tradition. And what that means is that, in my case, the information comes to me from a deity that's known in our tradition as Orunmila. And in our tradition, it is believed that this deity you know, witnessed the creation of the earth and therefore has a lot of the answers that you need or I need. And so one of the things that I do, you know, when I'm doing a reading for someone, I identify what areas of their life that they should be focusing on at that moment. And that could change. Sometimes someone might come, maybe they're concerned about a relationship that they're in, but the reading might indicate that that's not really what their focus should be. Maybe they should be focused on their emotional health, their emotional well-being. Maybe they're thinking about their relationship, right? But what they should be focused on instead is their health. Their health is their issue, right? At times it may be the career is where they should be directing their attention. So divination, these types of readings can be used in a lot of different ways for career questions, for all kinds of questions. And it's meant to help people walk closer to the path that they're meant to walk.
Thank you.
Hi, you know, I was in Nigeria and I had very conflicting feelings about some of the experiences that I saw there. And I was really struck by the fervency that the Christian practices, and I was in Igbo land most of the time. I did spend some time in Yoruba land. But I was kind of just disturbed by the fervency of accepting Christianity and Islam in place of the indigenous religion. And I was also struck by how much of the cross-fertilization of the Black American experience shows up there now. Simple things like on the poster boards where you will see preachers and their wives. This whole concept of First Lady and all of this stuff, and I just had conflicting feelings about it. And I just couldn't reconcile within myself the strength of having read Malidoma and read other of the historical part to it. It just struck me as, I don't know, how the fervency that people were accepting Christianity and using that as a way to practice things.
So that's a very, very good point. I wouldn't say it's true, you know, it struck me that way too, you know. And so one of the shocking thing is, in Nigeria, and I suppose in other parts of the culture, in Africa, the brand of Christianity over there, in some ways, it's more like strident, it's more like in your face, it's more like you better do this, or you better do that, you know. And so, to your point, when you go to Nigeria, you will find people are either predominantly Christian or Muslim, and that's it. So you won't find a lot of people openly talking about these same traditions, even though they come from Nigeria in this case, or Igbo was in this case. And just so you know, to give you a statistic, one of the great Yoruba leaders says that in Africa, a politician will never say that they practiced any type of indigenous faith, because that would be like political suicide. So a politician in Africa will either say the Christian or the Muslim, that's it. But don't expect them to say anything at all about anything traditional in any way. And so most people, they won't talk about that openly. Some of my closest friends, one of my closest friends is Yoruba also. He doesn't want his wife to know that he goes to diviners or that he does these things. He doesn't want his wife to know that his wife is Christian, you know? And so they won't openly talk about it. And to your point, from someone like, you know, for many of us who come from the West and go to a place like Nigeria, that is one of the shocking things. It's how undercover it is. It's how these other traditions dominate. Something else, the scholar Dr. Wande Abibola says that in the whole of Africa, there's only one country where there's a holiday for something that's indigenous, and that's Benin Republic, there's a holiday for the Vodou tradition. But nowhere else in Africa will you find a single holiday for anything that is indigenous. But you'll find Muslim holidays, and you'll find, of course, Christian holidays, but not one single holiday for anything that comes from our own tradition. And it's sad, but it's just true. And to your point, it is like, it does rub your spirit the wrong, And I remember on one trip to Nigeria, I was asking one of the brothers of my friend about the Yoruba tradition, right? And he said, I don't believe in that BS. And why did he say he doesn't believe in that BS? Well, he thought that's what I wanted to hear, right? He thought that I would approve of that. So there's a lot of education that has to happen, and it may not, it's not going to just happen in our lifetime, but one of the things I like about the popularity of films now, like Black Panther and Woman King, is people are becoming more aware of, in these films people are doing rituals, or in these films people are talking about ancestors. So these films, thank God, they've made this whole idea of ancestral reverence more mainstream in a way. In Woman King, several times Viola Davis talks about having a reading with the deity Ifa, right? She mentions that word several times in that film, And so slowly there's a shift happening. And I feel as more films like this come out, people will start to look at what we have in a positive way, Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Leandra, and I thoroughly enjoyed your talk. I came kind of at the end. I want to make a few comments, I guess, and a question, and kind of to address that last thing that you were saying about in Africa, it's either Muslim or Christian. I come from New Orleans, and so in New Orleans, the same thing. We're rooted in a lot of Dervishes and Vodou, and we have a reputation of voodoo, right? So no one's going to declare that we practice voodoo, because that's a dark or devilish way of practicing spirituality. So we don't have those holidays either, but people do practice in closed doors. People do talk in that way of the ancestors behind closed doors. But we do have celebrations like Mardi Gras, that's a Christian holiday because it's linked to Lent. We still have like the Christmas and the Creole Christmases and the Easter. So same thing in New Orleans. And I think it's really a way to devalue those systems because they're very powerful, because those are systems of ancestors that come and help us transform. And our history in Africa and here is colonization, right? Enslavement to keep us in a certain place. So I do think it's very important to open up to the ancestors, because like you said, they're here all the time. They're always speaking to us. They're always coming through us. And as you were talking about like the internet and these technologies and our sciences that have been developed from the West, I'm wondering if these are systems for the ancestors to come through. Because I notice when I'm on the internet that that's another pathway that ancestors speak to me very easily. Anytime there's an electric current of any kind, I find that that's when ancestors seem to pop up or have an easier time to express, things like that. And my question, so I have a question. I have been in the art of manifestation. I've been going to James Meeks, actually. I've known who he is since I think 2011. And when his book came out, I bought it immediately. And I still have it. And I've had a few readings from him, and every time I've had a reading, it's been completely accurate. So I really appreciate that mediumship that you provide for the community. But my question is, with this kind of new age manifestation talk, how does, and nobody ever mentions the ancestors when you dive into these, different lectures or, these people who have mastered manifestation, but they never mention the ancestors. So I'm wondering, what's your idea, or how do you explain those two realms? Because they're both invisible, and I think they're both together, but no one's ever talking about how that's really one. So that's my question, if you pondered on that.
So your first comment about the internet and how you're asking to just be a means, a vehicle, and that you get messages that way too. Well, the answer is, well, yes, because one, our ancestors are contemporary. They're not in the past. They might have lived in the past, but they know about current events, and they do know about current technology. So they could use any technology that they want to speak to us. They could use the internet if that's what they want. They could use Facebook if that's what they want to do. They could use TikTok if that's what they want to do. They could use Twitter. What matters is that they're going to use anything that they feel will be effective in communicating with you, right? Now, if you're never on the internet, well, no, they're not going to use the internet to speak to you. They're going to use maybe when you're out in nature, or maybe when you're just waking up. But the key is they're going to find a way, no matter what, to get through to you. Why? It's because it's their job. And why are they so concerned about you and me? Well, it's because they love you and they love me. And there's nothing that gives them greater joy than to be able to support us. That's what they're about. They're not here to judge us. They're here to celebrate with us, to celebrate our life and what our potential could be. So your second part about ancestors, why there's not much mention of ancestors. I feel that for so many people, there's a stigma associated with ancestors, so they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to express it that way. But what I would say is that what I've noticed from my own journey and my own practice, more and more of us are going back to the ways of the ancestors. And it's because we don't really have a choice. And when I say that we don't have a choice, what I mean is that if our ancestors know that our lives would be better if we had some contact with something that's indigenous, or something that's African or whatever, or something that involves an ancestor, that's where they're going to send us. And the way how they do that is just through inspiration. Just like I was guided to see Honey Companies who's in town. I didn't really want to go, but I went, right? So through their ability to speak to us telepathically, they will guide us back their way. But I say there's no choice. And so one of the key concepts in spirituality in general and in our system is this whole idea of balance. If something ebbs one way, right, well then it has to go back this way, right? There's no going without returning. So we may have left these traditions, but we have to go back to it because there's no choice. It's the way it is. It's a karmic cycle that brings us back to a state of balance. And so even the earth is always trying to correct itself, to go back to a state of balance. And that's why we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes. Why? It's because the earth is trying to balance itself, right? And so on our journeys, we tend to go back to things that our ancestors did. Oftentimes when I look at my own journey, I ask myself, how is it possible that I could be doing this type of work when I grew up Roman Catholic, right? But here it is, and I grew up in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, but here it is that people around the world associate me and my name with Europe as West Africa. And they don't associate me so much with the own Caribbean culture that I grew up with. How is that even possible? That I'm more connected to West Africa. But where I grew up from, they don't connect me to that so much. So it shows me over and over again the power of the ancestors. And so what I want to say to you is, your ancestors are powerful. Your ancestors are powerful. they will guide you, they will support you, and they know what you're doing. That's everything I want to say. So even as things don't seem to be going in your favor or your direction, just know that they have a plan for you. They're working on something for you. Even though at the moment, even if you're stressed out, they're trying to work something out for you that you can't see. But if you just keep going, you're going to understand. You're going to see how some of the things you dread are going to turn out to bless you. Some of the things you're afraid of will turn out to be a great blessing to you.
I'm good. I don't think we need to. Thank you for that. As your person gets who were speaking, I was thinking quite a few of my friends now, they have an ancestor table, you know, for their relatives. And I saw this movie, I can't remember the name of it. It was kind of interesting because it was that the ancestors die a second death when we don't remember them. You know, we have the whole service and the memorial, and then after that, nobody, if they're in the family, don't mention. And since I saw that, I was making sure, I know some cultures celebrate like, you know, when they pass, like when that person did their transition, and other cultures still celebrate like birthday. Well, in my family, they're still celebrating birthday. So I really make a point to send a picture and just say certain things about, you know, like my brother and things like that. And now it's getting my family more involved in, you know, remembering. And so I know that's a part of that remembering. But wow, when I heard that, like, wow, if you don't, you know, mention their names or, you know, share the stories with the younger people in the family, you know, it is almost like a second death, because that person that lived and shared within that family, we need to tell their stories too. Other than that, it's just kind of lost. So, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, thank you for that comment. So yeah, the key is remembering. They want to be remembered, you know, and they want to let us know that they are around. And so sometimes that's why they show up in readings or whatever, is they want to remind us that I'm here. Not just that I'm here, but I'm a resource. I'm a resource for you. You should use me. I'm here to help. You know, and that's one of the key messages we hear over and over again.
I have a question or an issue, and that is, ancestors are indeed important, but how is it that we have gotten away from even remembering our ancestors? When I was a kid growing up, and I would go and visit my paternal grandmother, she had in what was called the front room, which is the living room, it was walls of photographs. Now, my grandparents were born in the late 19th and early 20th century. And photographs became very important. And so when I would pass by, you know, a wall and I would ask about a particular image, and she'd say, "Oh, that's your uncle such and such." Well, not my uncle, but my father's uncle, or a great uncle for him. But it was a way of, I learned my lineage by looking at the wall. We don't do that today. My great aunt made quilts, but each one of those patches was a way of remembering someone and some incident in the family, because it was made with patches from old pieces of cloth that they wore. So that when it was spread across the bed instantaneously became, however momentarily, an altar, and which for ancestral reflection. We don't even necessarily make quilts anymore. So, you know, there are some ways that we are getting away from. We can talk about what happens in Nigeria, what happens here in the United States of America that we don't remember, or we consciously try not to remember.
Well, thank you for that. So, one of the things I would say is that I feel, it's important, I feel, to understand that we're in a state of war, all of us. And what I mean by that is that, you know, one of the, the strategies of just the whole colonialism and slavery, all of these things, is to make sure that we don't connect to anything that could give us the upper hand, right? We don't connect to anything that could give us any semblance of power, right? And removing us from ancestors, that's part of the strategy. And how did they do that today? Well, they're not going to, they may not say, well, don't have anything to do with the ancestors, but they'll make sure that we have 24/7 entertainment, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, and so we're always distracted. We're always paying attention to someone else's story, except our own. We're always studying someone else's lives, except our own. And it's a strategy to undermine people so that we don't connect not only to our ancestors, but to our own spiritual power. Because the more we connect to our own spiritual power, which we all have, right? Well, then the more dangerous we become, the more influential that we become. And they don't want influential people. They want us entertained. And the more entertained we are, well, then we don't pay attention to political moves that they're making, economic moves that they're making. So the whole disconnect with the ancestors is just part of a strategy, right? And the whole thing of making sure we're disconnected from the earth is another part of the strategy, that we're not growing our own food, that we're not self-reliant in any way. I feel it's all about undermining ourselves, right? And so what we have to do is, all of us, we just have to find different ways of taking our power back and believing in ourselves again and honoring the things that give us strength and becoming aware of, you know, what gives us strength, you know. But it's always a campaign to disassociate people with power, but it's just a tactic of warfare. So for example, if you look at recent military history, when the US has invaded countries like Afghan and Iraq, what they're doing is they're attacking the Quran or mosque, or they're visibly destroying whatever books that they consider holy and sacred. Why? Well, it's because they want to undermine people's connection to whatever they feel gives them power. So it's just a tactic that they use. So we just have to understand that even though it may not look like we're in a state of war, we are, because they're hijacking our minds. They're taking us away from ourselves. They're taking us away from, you know, getting in touch with ourselves. And they're giving us ready-made entertainment 24/7. Why? So that we could stay subdued and distracted, and so that we could be good consumers.
Okay,
I think she has a question.
since I know that Ms. Claudia has a question, but before you give to Ms. Claudia, I want to make a comment here, because you talk about back to nature, and this is one of Ms. Claudia's favorite topics, so I'm going to pass it on to her, but I want to mention about mental health, meditation, getting back to earth. AMLO, of course, is here to preserve African American history and culture, which means a lot, takes up a lot of things. And with that in mind, I started the Seed Lending Library, okay, in a card catalog, a very old card catalog, and I didn't know how it was going to be acknowledged with the community. I put seeds, we had seeds in the card catalog, and invited people when they walked in to get the seeds in for free and take them home and possibly bring us some seeds back. Well, it went over very well. So I decided to create its own department. So if you haven't seen the Animal Seed Lending Library, you need, before you leave, just go by and check it out. But we're talking about getting back to nature, growing our own food. And you can come here, get seeds. You'll see how the setup is. Take them home, grow them in small containers and large containers, let them go to seed. Now we'll show you how to save seeds if you're interested. Let those go to seed and then bring them back to us. And that's why we call it the Seed Lending Library. Now, I designed it, but I am not an expert on gardening, but I do have someone here who's going to talk to you about it. Miss Claudia Noble Levison, who's also our president of the Friends and Stewards, is also very my expert in gardening as well as herbs, and I'm going to let her speak to you about her workshop that she just did here. This is totally amazing, talking about ancestors.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Claudia Noble Levinson, as Peter mentioned. I'm passionate about growing my own food and sharing my knowledge. When you were talking about honoring our ancestors and remembering, one thing, for me, I do things, I don't really understand always why I'm doing it. But when I'm in a company of people that are like-minded, I begin to better understand myself. And listening today and talking about remember our ancestors, well, for me, I remember my ancestors through gardening, through seeds, remembering the stories my grandmother would share. One plant that she spoke about was bee balm, bergamot. And I was like, oh God, what's that? I need to find that plant, I need to find that seed. And I did, and I finally, I struggled for about a year and a half to get it to grow. It just would not. I'm like, God, what am I doing wrong? Grandmother, help me, you know. And a year and a half ago, it began to grow and actually flower. And she talked about how she would use that plant to condition her hair, making her own, hairdresser or conditioner. And so that's my goal, to say, oh, I'm going to do that and share that with others, that you can use plants as medicine and the importance of it. And our foods, that we eat, it can bring up memories. We have a lot of conversation and things that we remember at the dinner table. And just the foods, like for example, I want to grow some black-eyed peas. I better understand why we ate black-eyed peas. We had them all the time, black-eyed peas, cornbread, collard greens. So that's a memory, food for me, and trying to, and remembering that taste, in search of pursuit of that taste of the foods that we just can't always find in the store. But if you have a seed, and that seed that you grow yourself and nurture, that joy of bringing it to life, and it becomes, you have a bountiful crop, and then, cooking it and then sharing with others, and the stories, and passing those seeds along. So that is a way to remember, not just through photographs, but, you follow what I'm saying? So the seed library downstairs in the seed library department, there's a lot that can come from the earth and nature that you do not really always realize how healing it can be for you, mentally, physically, spiritually, totally. I just get so immersed in that department. So as Vita mentioned, I know I'm just talking there, I want to listen, but visit the seed library. Experiment. You don't have to be an expert. Just experiment and see what happens. I see some familiar faces here that have, attended some of the workshops that we have coming up. This next Saturday is Earth Day, so we'll have a workshop here. You can make your own garden theories. Ms. Karen will be coming, of the Black Dog Association will be here during that, and I'll be doing a couple of demonstrations on how you can grow your own. Just start herbs. Oh my God, I start talking about herbs, that's a whole another thing for me, the scents bring about memories for me. I'm sure you all can relate. If not, try it. You will be surprised how you will become more connected to yourself, connected to the earth. Thank you so much for listening. I really do care because it's just so an awakening kind of sort of for me. And I love sharing. So, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Samples were wonderful. That's what I would do too. So I want to take this opportunity to really thank Mr. James Weeks. I mean, just listen to him, calm me. I think he is just so amazing. I want to have you all as a witness. Also, I am inviting Mr. James Weeks to be a part of my Festival of Knowledge and do a session. And invite all of you and your friends to listen to him if he accepts my invitation to being one of my speakers at the Festival of Knowledge. We need to have you here. We do. We do.
We have some here.
Yeah.
We have some here.
We have some honey here.
Yeah, we do.
I do too. Oh, by the way, we do have some books too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have James' books here. We have some honey here, and we have some membership applications here. Okay, so thank you so much. Before I close it out, though, I want to give James the last say so. Anyone have any last minute comments or thoughts before? No? Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to you, James. Closing remarks.
Sure. So in the back of this book, of course, as some of you know, they're just inspirations and affirmations. So I'll just randomly just pick a few. All right. Give up the need to know how it will happen. Give up the need to know when it will happen. Give up the need to control how it will happen. Leave such details in the hands of God and our ancestors. Decide you will be who you are, not who the world wants you to be. Decide you will listen to the inner voice, not the noise of the outside world. Decide you will honor the light within. Start with self-love. Appreciate and respect who you are. Never be so hungry for love that you lose sight of who you are, what you have, and what you've been sent here to do. Be steady, be consistent, be ready, be persistent. This is your time. This is your life. This is your journey. This is your opportunity season. Thank you so much for coming. So I'll be signing books over there for those who want some, and we also have some honey. Welcome to honey. You're welcome to try Sweet Simone organic honey.